Welcome to the Moynihan Report here on the Two-Way Network. I am your host, Michael Moynihan. When we were gearing up for the show, we called some of our friends because we have to shoot like pilots. We have to figure this stuff out. So this wasn't a set. This was just a bunch of chairs and it was black. And we came down here and shot some pilots to see how things would work. And but one of those we really enjoyed. And because tonight, on Tuesday, you probably know this because I hope you got tickets, and if you're in the area, are coming in New York City at 7 o'clock. Well, you won't be. This is going to air at 7, so you're not there yet. We are having a debate with our friends at FIRE about the free speech record of the Trump administration. So we took that opportunity to go into the archives, which is from like 2 months ago, and figured we'd pull this one out. And this is a conversation with my old friend, Thomas Morton, who was, a lot of you probably know, was a host on the Vice HBO show. And Thomas did a documentary about the guy, I think, who hired him, probably hired him. And that guy is Gavin McInnes. You know him, right? So we decided to sit down and talk about this. I think I'm 15 pounds heavier and have a beard. So normally I wouldn't look like this on camera. So this is humiliating, but we need to put this up for you because it was so good. All right, so we're gonna press play on this episode of the Moynihan Report, and this is my conversation with Thomas Morton, who will join us after we show this interview. All right, well, we have a guest today who is an old friend of mine, an old colleague of mine from the Vice days. You will remember him from Vice on HBO in various Vice things. Like I just watched one the other day of you getting knocked out in South America, which is great. And we'll talk about that too.
Knocked down.
Knocked down. Did get knocked out. But
I didn't go
Thomas Morton recently made a film that if you're Canadian, sorry about that, but if you're Canadian, you can watch it on the CBC website. It's Not Funny Anymore, which is a film about his former colleague and sort of mentor in a way, Gavin McInnes, who went on from founding Vice to founding the Proud Boys. Thomas, thanks for being here.
Sure.
Why did you want to revisit this? Like, if Gavin was a part of your life in a very big way. You started in journalism, and he basically gave you your first job, right?
Well, I don't know if I wanted to, but you know, it seemed appropriate, and there was kind of like a hard time limit on being able to do that.
Yeah.
You know,
but does he have? And we'll work backwards from this way. But does he have influence now? I feel like I don't see him much anymore.
How influential was Strasser in 1933? You know.
Well, enough to get kicked out of the
Among
party,
sorts,
by the way.
he's still going.
Yeah.
He's still
Are you talking about Otto Strasser or Gregor Strasser?
Gregor, I think. Yeah, I forget.
But he's out there, but he is kind of in the news again because Trump decided to pardon every January 6th guy, including the head of the Proud Boys,
right,
which was not Gavin McInnes.
Enrique Tarrio,
Tarrio,
who was in jail on charges not related. Well, they were related to January 6th, but he was already in jail for
other stuff,
for like a church fire.
Yeah, he like vandalized a sign or something, like a Black Lives Matter sign.
He just got kind of like grandfathered into the pardon. Yeah.
Yeah. So you go backwards and you decide to do this film about Gavin McInnes. He's in the film?
Yes.
Was it hard to get him to sit down?
No.
No,
it took a lot of cajoling.
Yeah,
I don't know what you mean by hard. Yeah,
like in the sense that Gavin has a complex that the media is
out to get him.
Yeah,
everybody in his life has betrayed him.
Yes,
he has never changed. He has never done anything wrong.
Yes,
yeah. So it took about 2 months ish to convince him that I wasn't just out to do a hit piece on him.
Which comes across in the film. It doesn't feel like a hit piece.
Well, good.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was going to do a hit piece about him, I wouldn't have called him at all.
So how do you feel about him in the sense that, like, I have very mixed feelings because there is no denying that Vice became popular because of the voice of the magazine and how funny it was. And that was from the beginning 100% Gavin.
Yeah.
100% him.
No, he's the golden goose,
Yeah.
in terms of editorial content. No, super mixed feelings. It's a crazy thing. What I kept saying, like in lieu of kind of assigning a moral valence
Yeah.
to his story or to trying to like learn and tell his story was, I was like, this is just a crazy thing
Yeah.
that happened in the last 20 years of, world history at this point, right?
He's kind of right in some sense that like I never changed and blah, blah, blah. It's like, if you knew him back in the day, people suspected there was something a bit off about his politics, right?
Right, but if you go back further from that and you read like the comics he was writing in his 20s, he's completely changed. He used to say this. This is one of the things that kind of like that sets me a little that I find a little off-putting is that if you read he wrote a memoir in 2012 or 2013.
Published by a mainstream publisher, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of sex in that book, by the way.
Yeah.
Actually pretty good sex writing.
It's a funny book.
It is, and it is a funny book. He is never not funny.
Yeah.
But he was a classic proponent of the the right-wing convert. He was like, I was a punk, I was an anarchist, I was a diehard leftist, I was a feminist, I have all the tattoos to prove it, I was a vegan, etc. And then, I found the light and now I'm a conservative. Which is it's a conservative cliche. And I don't know when it changed, but sometime in the last 3 or 4 years, that shifted to, I never changed, the world changed around me. My politics are exactly the same as they were when I was a 20-year-old. And it's like, he's so productive, there's a body of work that can prove otherwise. His comics are constantly, like everything he loves or professes to love these days is shit upon in his comics. He hates Americans. He hates sports. He hates country music. He never wants to get married. He thinks marriage is a foolish trap. He thinks kids are disgusting,
But there was always something weird about it to me that it followed exactly the professional kind of right-wing pattern. Like he became religious, started talking about religion, like said things about abortion, said things about marriage.
He's
and
the original
women.
tradcath. Yeah.
No, he is. Like he's like the tradcon. But I was like, okay, you could do that and still be a little bit punk rock and say, I have like liberal social views. It seemed like the social views changed pretty considerably too. Gavin's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he went hard right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so, and one of the reasons I think it's not surprising is like recount for people who don't know this, because I'm often asked about this, like particularly during like the first Trump administration, everyone said, is Gavin still at Vice? And by the way, when you were trying to interview people in DC, it was very helpful during the first Trump administration. There was a lot of people that knew Gavin, they knew Vice, they kind of vaguely knew it.
Right.
But he was run out.
Yeah.
Why?
Racism, but also kind of he was a detriment to the profitability of the brand, right? That's the thing you hear overwhelmingly. There's 3 founders, Shane, Sarush, and Gavin. Gavin was the funny one, Shane was the good businessman. Sarush was the one who was sane and kept the whole operation together. That is the usual consensus you get from people. And Gavin went further and further, kind of like out past the Overton window of, not just of like, bipolar politics or whatever, right-wing conservatism. He just wouldn't stop hitting like flagrantly racist points or whatever. And it was, and so it was, the question is, sorry for the long pause.
No,
trying to figure out how to say this.
No, we'll actually in edit make it longer. Makes you look more thoughtful.
What I think the Gavin version of it is that Shane and Sarush were jealous of his the success that he was bringing on to them in his facility with language, and that he was getting to write everything, and they were the business guys, and that wasn't cool, and so they looked for an opportunity to kick him out. What I've heard from people who are around in like the 90s and 2000s was that anytime Shane would talk about making the company bigger, about getting into video or television and those deals, even before the racist stuff came up, like every major investor would say, the one thing you've got to, that is going to be a necessary step in this process of getting rid of Gavin, or at least just telling him to chill out with like the pee-pee poo-poo stuff, right?
Yeah.
You know?
But he maintains that the racism was an excuse to get him out for other
Right,
reasons.
yeah, but it's like in my mind, I'm like, you gave him such a perfect excuse, you know?
Yeah.
They weren't wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
But when you ask him that now, and particularly on camera, I suspect you get a slightly different answer. If he is racist, he says no, right?
I forget, yeah. Because what I tried to put to him was just that I think like before any moral problems with racism, I think it's a dumb typology. It doesn't work. It's discredited for a reason, not because it was mean, but because empirically it holds no weight.
Yeah. Because racism.
It's like, oh, everybody acts like I think they look. You know?
Yeah.
It's a dumb guy's like organizational structure for the world, right? And I forget if he like his thing is he's like, oh, I just noticed patterns in the world that just happen to always be, you know, racial in nature and mostly about 2 or 3 specific races.
Yeah.
He's like, but anytime I meet someone new, I treat them as individuals.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone who knows Gavin in any way that hasn't heard him drop the N-bomb. Usually in public and quite
constantly.
loud.
He loves it. Yeah, no. And it's,
But is that like, how much of that is like the transgressive Gavin who's like a fucking 17-year-old kid from Mississauga, Ontario or something, constantly trying to push people's buttons? And like, I noticed that when I knew him a little bit, and you know, you go out with him and he would try to like make a loud racist comment to get people to crane their necks towards him. Right. And like, I'm like, okay, so for years, people at Vice, people around Vice, people who, you know, liked Vice would ask me the same question. This is before the Proud Boys. Is he serious? Is it an act? Is he just putting this on as kind of the quote unquote hipster racism?
Well, what he'd tell you is that he hasn't basically like thrown his life away and gotten in trouble with the you know, the legal authorities up until now in this country for an act. However, if you know, if you've been around him and you've seen how he tells jokes, how he riffs, how he'll continue jokes for like months and years at a time with no discernible punchline, it's not an unreasonable thing to ask. And he kind of waffles between being serious and joking to whatever, you know, to whichever end kind of allows him to keep going and keep him out of trouble. You asked like how much of like the racial slurs is provocative, and I'd say 70%.
Yeah.
Versus that was one of the things.
But it can be provocative and you can believe it too at the same time.
Well, there's that too. That's the thing. Yeah, it's like just.
It's not a binary choice here, right?
Well, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't disprove your. And it's like I kind of went into it thinking about and being like, oh, is he racist or not? Like, I'm going to figure out what he believes. But it's like if everybody who listens to you makes that mistake, what is it? I'm never going to get like a glimpse inside your brain. It doesn't matter what you believe. You're acting the part. You know, it's kind of like Mother Night. You know, if he's pretending, if this is an act, you have to be careful who you pretend to be, because who you pretend to be is also who you are, right?
And when you interviewed him, you hadn't seen him in how long?
Oh, 13 years? 14?
Okay, let's watch.
It's been a while.
Let's watch a clip, and I'll set it up because I don't think you know which one we're going to play. But this is when you met Gavin in New York, and you're waiting for him to come say hello to you for the first time in 13 years.
Oh yeah.
All right. Very close to on time, which is dangerous. Let's see what he's got to say. All right, act cool, guys. Oh, there he is.
Like his weird walk.
Hello?
Like, is that an act or not? Does he always hold his arms out? Like MMA style?
Yeah! The bushes! No!
Straight in the bushes.
Ah, Jesus.
I'm so sorry.
Then he made fun of how I looked.
It's okay.
Because I was covered
know
in
the
leaves.
It's so embarrassing.
you got it's the weather, the wind up here kind of throws
I
your.
haven't seen you in so long. I
It's
got
been about.
enthusiastic.
I like your tie. I brought ties, so
Oh, good.
I'm not dressed down under this. I got a couple options, but we can
Okay,
do. You know,
great,
what are we?
yeah.
Hi.
Dressed down. Look at this.
Well, you just threw me in a bush.
Button.
Well, yeah, now that
I love that he turns you to your cameraman.
See.
You look like
our band.
Neil Hamburger since I last saw you.
Look at this. They cut to Neil Hamburger this morning, too.
That's fuck, man.
All right, shall we go to the
maybe they
secret
didn't. Maybe
location?
it's
No.
Oh, yeah, secret. Okay, yes. I was gonna say.
So that's where I meet people here, and then we shuttle to the secret spot because I can't have people know the address.
Understood. Okay, yeah. Do we need to get like black bagged and put in a van, or?
Yeah, basically. Well, we'd have to cut.
Yeah.
You ready?
It's the big time.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Your curtain.
This is it.
Put a garbage bag there so people think it's a construction site.
Oh.
Welcome to the studio. This is my office.
Thank you.
Could I get your sweater?
A little steam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just driving me crazy, these zigzags.
On it. Yeah. Well. Thanks.
The zigzags
Neil
from where he
Hamburger.
threw me into a bush.
I don't even find that insulting or anything. It's a fact.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, see?
Yeah, you can pause it now.
Dandruff all over your coat. You're like a Marxist.
I remember mentioning this to somebody who knew him, and
Yeah.
they thought it was like animal psychology. It was like, oh, he's got to like
Sort of dominate you from the very beginning
Yeah,
by
yeah.
throwing you into the bushes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That, and then insulting everything that he has caused me to look like. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's my memory of him too, is just always insulting
just
you.
from the get-go.
Yeah. That, like, look, it's hard. And that's why I asked you before we started, like, how were the filmmakers, I mean, the CBC and the people who you're working with, because it's hard not to humanize somebody. I mean, the opposite would be dehumanizing somebody, but to humanize somebody in, like, because he is charming, and you need to show that, and you're not deliberately showing it. Gavin just exudes that. And that's why he's popular. That's why he was a leader of the Proud Boys.
Right, yeah. I think it's important too because it's from a certain perspective and from a lot of the people who knew him in Williamsburg in the 2000s,
Yeah.
his story has a tragic arch. That this is a guy who had everything to like available to a creative 30-something. Like he ran a magazine that was like by no right whatsoever a hit around the world and became
Hugely
$1 million
influential, yeah.
company. And got kicked out right as its stock was soaring, and lost all his friends, and now has built a little movement of kind of,
Replacement friends, who are very
not
different
even
than
that,
their previous friends.
like kind of kids who need to be told not to masturbate too much, right?
Yeah.
How to politely say that.
It's a bit of a change.
And that in order to, for
From
anybody
David Cross to you got to stop jerking off so much.
in the hats.
A little different.
Who all dress like him,
Yeah.
like a weird little
Fred
like
Perrys and,
Sorcerer's Apprentice sort of mini-me situation, and so what I told the filmmakers from the get-go is like everybody who knows him as like whatever they like a controversial figure or like a hate monger or whatever, it's like we have to establish that this was a funny, beloved guy.
Correct.
Among exactly the kind of people you wouldn't, if you only knew that, you wouldn't assume, such that you can see the arc, which is either tragic or if
I
in
think
Gavin's mind supposedly triumphant. But I wonder. Yeah.
I mean, I'll say one thing in defense of Gavin is that he is amazingly admirable in one way. He has had everything multiple times in his life, and he has just destroyed it on purpose. And Vice, which becomes, supposedly a $6 billion company, less than that, but a huge company. He has an ad agency after that he's fired from his own ad agency because he
And
writes
gets it
something
closed.
about trans people.
Yeah.
Right? He was an OG on the trans issue.
Well aware.
And
Yeah.
the Proud Boys thing, he has to remove himself from that because of criminal stuff. And it's just like,
Everything he builds, he loses control of.
but it's also pretty admirable in the sense that he's never, like, I don't like his views, but I like the fact in a way that there's somebody that has principle with those bad views, that he's like, fuck it, I'll leave Vice, I'll get kicked out of my own company, I'm not gonna shut up about this stuff, and I'm gonna get kicked out of YouTube, gonna get kicked off of Twitter, and then he has to make his own, like, streaming company that's like behind a paywall, which presumably is successful enough to keep his life going, right?
Yeah.
And then you see the stuff about the town that he lives in. people not serving him at the coffee shop.
Right.
I was like, wow, that's crazy. And he just keeps going.
Yeah.
What is, do you know what, his wife?
Indefatigable.
Yes, I think that'd be what his wife thinks about this. He was very interestingly a Native American too.
I guess.
Which he talks about. This is some sort of cover that he has.
I don't know. I left the marriage stuff out, just for lack of. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're interpersonally, they're like one of those couples who's just like remained, like noxiously in love.
Yeah.
By the account of their kind of few remaining friends from the early days.
Do you know that there are some that remain? I mean, I remember
there's a
him
few people
telling
who are
me,
still in touch. No one's
Yeah.
I don't think it. Well, there's a couple people who are still pretty buddy with
Well,
it,
I'll
who have to kind of like keep it on the down low because he is so fucking like radioactive.
Yeah, and I will say the secret that I won't name any names, but the secret is that I would get text messages from people from Vice who worked with Gavin back in the day of links to things that he had produced recently that were very funny.
Yeah.
Which means that they're still watching and monitoring and actually sending them, not publicly and saying, like, this is hilarious, actually, you should watch this.
Yeah.
And I mean, but I always think of that with his kids. Our kids went to the same school, by the way, when he was in New York City. And it is a very taxing and it's a lot to ask of your wife and your kids to become that person, right? But the Proud Boys was not initially, well, let me just ask you this, because the Canadian government, you did this film in Canada, has labeled officially the Proud Boys a hate group, a hate organization, or a fascist organization.
Terrorist.
A terrorist organization.
Legally obliged to call them terrorists.
In the film?
In Canada.
Really?
I forget. No, we just mentioned the fact that they've been listed as a terrorist organization. It doesn't...
that seems
we
a little...
steered away from the Proud Boys since it's an ongoing story.
Yeah, I noticed that. But is that a fair characterization of the Proud Boys?
Oh, probably not. Geez, dude, I don't know. Ask me in 5 years when like the web of lies has been removed. I dug into the guy we interviewed on camera, John. I forgot his last name.
Yeah.
I read his court case. I read Tario's court case, and there's shit the Proud Boys aren't admitting about themselves that's dubious and kind of sketchy. And there's shit that the prosecutors did to each of the guys whose case I read where I'm like, that's a little over the line.
Yeah.
And it's like, and this is kind of why I wanted to mostly focus on, early years Gavin, find the explanations for whatever in that, also because there was a whole conceit to this thing that I'm trying to research a book about Vice, and so that's the important part or whatever. But it's an ongoing story, and nobody's operating in good faith.
Yeah.
So,
but he walked away from it. But that was a legal thing. It wasn't actually that he had ideological.
He made that very clear.
Yeah.
He said, it was my lawyers tell me what I need to do is this. I don't know exactly what his relationship is with the Proud Boys, but he's not disavowed them.
Yeah.
He's still.
I think America's disavowed them. I think that like January 6th is probably the death knell. They don't seem to be showing up at protests anymore.
Well, what protests?
I mean, they used to find excuses to have protests.
Right.
Like a drag show.
There hasn't been much of that.
Yeah. This was the kind of impetus for the film was because you're actually researching a book about Vice?
Hopefully, yeah. I mean,
so you still
need to get my act together.
Can I ask a very challenging question that I'm going to ask you to answer in a brief way?
Try.
What is the story of Vice?
Oh, Jesus.
Like, what is, like, if you could, somebody says, give me the pitch for the book that you want to write, what is that pitch?
Am I supposed to, okay. I thought it was going to be like one of the synesthetic things where I'm supposed to be like ambrosia.
Associate it with a color. The burnt sienna of Vice. But like, if you were to say, all right, what is this book about? If you were to pitch an agent or a publisher,
the last great American subculture, and it's its flagship publication.
Yeah.
The how two Canadians and I think Sarush from Minnesota, I forget.
I think he's Canadian, isn't he?
We lived there.
Yeah.
How two
Yeah.
look, sorry, Sarush.
How
how
two
two
Canadians and a
Canadians
Pakistani.
deformed the
Yeah,
American
yeah.
media landscape
Yeah.
and eventually, the political landscape.
So where does that end, and is it even possible?
That's the question.
Yeah, that a company that's like that in its kind of punk rock and its ethos and creating a new kind of genre of magazine in a way, can it actually be the same forever? Can it actually remain? Things don't remain cool, right? I mean, it was inevitable that it was going, but it not only didn't remain cool, it just became something totally different.
Well, that's in
a bad way, I think.
That would have been a great ending to the story if it had ended there. Right?
Yeah.
Now we got to watch and see where it actually ends.
It's not over?
No, it got resurrected yet again by some VC firm in Nashville. Unless that's fallen through. That happened back in summer.
Oh wow! But it's not the same.
I have no
It's just
idea.
a logo.
Last time I went to the website, there was like one of the front and center on the homepage was something called the Gender Identity Stock Photography Collection.
Oh yeah.
That was like a zip file
Yes.
that you could download.
Yes.
That
Very
was just
generous of
like stock photos of like women holding hands.
Yeah. But isn't that like to Gavin?
It wasn't that good of stock photography either.
Well, yeah. I mean, stock photography is never that good, but yeah.
that's a
but
fair
isn't
point.
the funny thing with Gavin is that he gets kicked out of his own company for making fun of trans people, writing an essay about how people who are trans are mentally ill, and where the company that he founded ends up is a company flogging, a trans stock photo archive in the weirdest. I don't even understand why one would do that.
The whole thing, yeah. Irony abounds.
Yeah.
Right?
But what is the thing about Vice that everyone misses? I mean, there's so many stories about it. I tried to write something about this, but
a good question.
It was about
I liked what you wrote. Yeah.
because and I don't think that was the story of Vice. It was that everyone was ignoring the content. They were just talking about Shane and business and Shane Smith and Eddie Moretti and like, what is the thing that all these people who just kind of parachute in and write a story miss?
I mean, I told the crew while we were making this, and while it was a little more focused on Vice and stuff like that, I was like, honestly, you could take about any one issue of the magazine and make a 2 to 3 hour doc just about what happened in the office then, like what the person, there were so many goddamn personalities in that room. And for like, I got there in 2004 and it felt like Gavin was out by around 2007.
Yeah.
And I lucked out for the first year or so before the crack started to show and before Gavin started to be kind of like foaming at the mouth racist. Everybody's like all these crazy people, like all their rhythms were synced up.
Yeah.
And it was like the dream house. It was like being in Abbey Road, or whatever. And it was fun. It was fun and productive.
When did it stop being fun?
I was there for 15 years, and it was year 15. That was when I found ways to have fun, and that is the job. Like the early days in the job, Gavin and then the editor of the magazine, Jesse Pearson, helped me learn to pursue the fun in anything and pursue interest, and that was, it was like I won the lottery with that job. I only ever did stories I wanted to do, and subjects I was interested in or whatever. But it was like up until like all the J School kids, which I think was another venture capital sort of thingy or whatever. What were they called? TPC? TCP?
Oh,
TPS?
TCP or
TRP,
something. I think that they might make flat screen TVs, but same thing. And when you brought
they made Vice TV pretty flat.
They did.
I'll tell you that.
Good Lord. But you have this stuff that happens where someone says, we need serious people so people take us seriously. I remember that moment.
We're news now.
We're news now, and somebody decided like, let's just give Fareed Zakaria some money. And he'll be on the show. Like, what? Why?
Yeah.
Why is Fareed Zakaria on this show? And I think that was maybe the beginning of the kind of decline.
I remember the first time I worked with a like young producer who had come out of like Columbia J School or something, and was good. And we worked on a piece, and she had good chops. It was fun making it. and I was excited. We talked about doing some more stuff, and within like she'd been there like 6 or 8 weeks, and then I went by her desk one day and she was gone, and I sent her a text and I was like, what about this idea we were going to pitch or whatever? And she's like, oh, I went to CBS. I was just there to. She's like, I don't think she said it quite so explicitly, but she was just there to get advice on her resume to jump somewhere else, and that was the first time. What I remember from the early days of the video stuff is that the pay was too bad for anybody to come work there who didn't want to work there. So it was weirdos who liked who they were working with and what the leeway they got for their projects or whatever. And as soon as it became a mainstream enough success that people were using it on their resume, that it had value to a resume, I think like that was for me the first, the distant bell that signaled its end.
I think that when I noticed that Vice was doing an impression of a real company was when they got an HR person and the HR person sexually harassed me. I was like, that's amazing.
Was it, can you bleep if I say the name?
Exactly.
What was his,
Yeah.
what was his circuit name?
Yeah, because he was like a leatherer. He had like a...
Something, Jorge?
It
was something Jorge.
That's it. But I didn't really understand I'd never worked at a company like this, and I didn't really understand what HR was.
Right.
But when I wrote about this, I mentioned it in the piece, and I said that he said something that was so horrifying and hilarious that, blah, blah, and they said, well, you got to put it what it is in it. I was like, there's literally no way. I'm putting the phrase that said to me, which was about my booty hole, which was literally what said to me. And I was like, yeah, this is the HR at this company.
Was he speaking in his capacity as HR?
We were in his office. I think that's the jurisdiction of HR. Yeah.
That guy ruled.
Yeah, I mean, he was amazing.
Yeah. He was the first HR.
He was the first HR, was like an unbelievable pervert. And there was a Twitter feed called Shit That HR Says. And I found it. It still exists. Oh. And it's just quotes from him.
It's back when people
I don't want to give us more bleeps.
Yeah.
But I think that, that job that you got, you said it was like an amazing stroke of luck.
Yeah.
2004.
Yeah,
You're how old?
20.
20 years old.
Yeah. Or just 21.
You weren't in college. You just...
It was my last year of college.
Last year of college.
I needed something to do over the summer between semesters, yeah. I got an internship.
And I mean, it absolutely directionally changed everything about your life.
Oh my God, yeah. I was like, I knew within a week. I was like, these guys, I loved the magazine. I thought the magazine was really funny.
Yeah. Which is Gavin.
Well, it was Gavin and Jesse. It was Gavin and Jesse and Amy Kellner and Leslie Arf. And Gavin's singular genius. He's a very funny guy. He's a very productive writer and a very funny writer. But what I've always seen as his genius is he collects people. He's done this since high school. He brings together amazing groups of people who are just perfectly balanced in each of their ways, and he absorbs from them. So the crew who are the main editorial cadre or whatever, who are writing all the articles, who are writing 3 to 4 articles a piece under assumed names in the magazine. So just a whole 115-page book every month by just these 4 people. With the most in sync, God, I keep accidentally saying this, and it just feels lamer and lamer each time. It was like meeting the Beatles. I was everybody's their groupthink. Now groupthink is the Grateful Dead, but there was it was like everybody's on the Paul same Revere page.
And the Raiders. Yeah,
and so much of it. And if you look at Gavin's writing over time, you can see him in his writing. You can see him meet each of his friends, because you can see where, he finds Leslie Arfin and her love of slang infects him. It totally changes how he writes.
And she becomes quite a well-known kind of comedy writer herself, right?
She was like the first person canceled off Twitter. Remember?
Oh yeah, when she made a joke about Precious.
Yeah, which was a really good joke.
Which was a funny joke. Yeah. And she got fired from Girls, I think. Wasn't she writing?
She got fired?
I think they
fired her. She wrote a lot of the first season, I know that.
Yeah.
And then she was in it, too. She had a cameo after the tweet incident.
Really?
Yeah.
But so you're there in the time in which that it is like a lot of raw talent and people just doing I think one of the great misunderstandings when people came in later was that, let's put everybody on camera who's not, what was the guy, Stone Phillips? With like the high cheekbones and they talk like this. The camera, that's what we don't do. We get the guys, and it's like, no, that's not it at all.
Right.
That was not it at all. You couldn't just take a journalist who was awkward on camera and be like, yeah, that's what Vice does. Like, you got the opportunity. Like, at what point in your life did you think, like, before Vice, like, I'm going to be like recognized by people on the street because I'm on TV?
Never.
That happened.
Ridiculous. Right? That would have been a ridiculous thing to think up until the point when it happened.
How did you get? How did they sort of cast you for the first MTV show and then the HBO show?
Well, there was a DVD first of all, right?
Yeah.
Before, and then internet video, and then the MTV show, and we all pitched stories for the DVD, which was going to be like a video magazine, like eight or nine stories. One came out, and I pitched this thing in South Carolina with the Black Lips, who had just signed to Vice Records and were just working on their 4th album, I think, or whatever, the big one with like Bad Kids on it and stuff. And I thought it'd be cool. They had history with the Gullah people in South Carolina.
Yeah.
I was like, you should go do that and do a thing about the Gullah people or whatever. And
nobody
Shannon or Eddie was like, okay, you go do it, and you host it with the guys or whatever. And that was it.
And no one had any idea what they were doing, right?
Oh, Christ, no. And the whole thing fell apart, like, completely.
Yeah.
The guy who was supposed to show us how to make moonshine, I think it had a stroke or something while we were driving down. I drove down. I just, like, in my, like, I had my grandma's old Camry up in New York, and me and a camera guy drove to South Carolina.
This is the worst fucking idea I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, it was a mess.
Send Thomas in his grandmother's car to the guy who just had a stroke and interview him about moonshine.
Yeah, with a band. Yeah, with a band who at that point were more famous for barfing on stage than for their like music.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to the camera guy. It was the first time I'd ever met the guy, and he's obviously a real professional. And being like, I don't really know what I'm doing here. And he was like, oh, I get it, man. Yeah, no worries. I'm totally cool. Like, working on my own. I'm pretty autonomous. And I'm like, no. Just like, I'm sorry. I realize that sounds like something people say.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing here. So just like, literally.
Yeah. But did that piece ever come out?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It exists somewhere.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah. Well, it was a great lesson in just keep the cameras rolling.
Yeah.
Because we just went and got into weird trouble.
I mean, it
turned out great. Yeah, no, that was the first piece that I was ever in.
I mean, it's kind of like
a series called Americana.
A weird,
Jesse did.
Like harbinger of what's to come with a bunch of people doing this stuff on YouTube on their own.
It's funny, right? Yeah.
That's Vice was kind of responsible for that, right? In so many ways.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, I mean, it is the kind of archetype is the early Vice stuff of people not knowing what they're doing in any way. I watched an old Vice piece the other day, and I could not believe, like a very old one of the On Acid series.
Yeah.
And with Dan, the equipment guy.
That's not even that old.
And it's not even that old, but they were talking to him in the front seat, and they were shooting right behind him.
Yeah.
Not across, which is the back of his head.
Just the
and
back
I
of
was
his
like, this
head.
is a very bad, no one knows what they're doing. And doing drugs, I mean, you talked about this, I can't remember, getting drugs and doing drugs in the office for supposed journalistic purposes. And then there was a moment where you couldn't do that anymore.
What was supposed about? Oh, yeah. Then
And then you couldn't do that anymore.
Okay,
right?
that's a good point, too.
Is it like a culture change thing, too? Because like everything kind of changes around 2013, 14.
That's right.
Like people feel a little more sensitive about things. You look back at those old magazines. Like no one balked at We Love Cops as a cover.
Plenty of people balked at that.
Really?
Yeah, that was a controversy when it came out.
That was?
But some people loved it, yeah.
Oh, I didn't.
I mean, it was
I remember that.
That was kind of Gavin and Jesse's. Like, I mean, they wanted to make that. It was based off an old book called Cops by sort of like a working man studs turtle named Mark Baker. That pissed people off. That was a shot across the bow of the cop hating left.
Yeah, I guess people get annoyed by it, but there was no campaigns to like take away your advertisers.
That shit wasn't. Yeah. Oh no. People were a little less
What do you think when you
up
go
their
back to
ass
look at
about-
those magazines now?
People just dismiss that shit, or they'd write a letter, be like, "You
Yeah,
assholes,"
pretty much how it
and
should
that would
be.
be it. And then
Yeah.
they'd go on with their lives. People had lives back then too. They weren't spending their whole life on the fucking internet. Right?
Yeah.
So different
If you
different
go
times.
back and take an issue that you were a part of in, say, 2005.
You can't make any of that shit anymore, right? Yeah. Or
And
you
that's-
can make it, you just can't put it on the internet. That's all.
Yeah, like he's like Johnny Ryan stuff and things like that. But when you go back,
Who
and
worked for
look at-
Nickelodeon for a long time as
he
the
really?
I forget what his position was.
But it's pretty shocking now because like we've all kind of become accustomed to what you can and cannot say. And I look at the magazine, I'm like, oh my God, there's a lot of like, you know, when Jill Abramson, the plagiarist liar from the New York Times, wrote her book, she was like consulting old magazines as if she had discovered, you know, Mein Kampf or something. She's like, I cannot, they had this article and that. I couldn't believe it. And it's like, yeah, the editor of a major newspaper, you haven't seen articles like this, but it's just kind of alien to people now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the world got a lot more lame. Or the lame took over, you know, the kind of the dominant discourse.
So is there anything, there's nothing like it now, I guess. I'm trying to think if there's anything.
Not that I know of. Hopefully there is something like it somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe not in America.
Yeah.
Maybe not on the internet. You know, I remind myself when I get kind of bummed out by how the kids look. I'm like, the only kids I know about and could possibly see are the kids on the internet.
Yeah.
It's like, it's possible that's it. And that is the actual, you know, the culture of whatever you want to call the generation.
Yeah.
But I, you know, as an object of faith, I like the idea that there are kids doing something that I couldn't possibly know about because it would be the equivalent of Vice, you know, in 2002 or 2003. That was, you know, unique to its social milieu, right?
Yeah.
People did not, before the MTV show and then the HBO show, it's like people's parents didn't know about that. They would have no way to know about that. It was like one of the last vestiges of a proper counterculture or underground, right? And
Yeah, I mean, when I
hopefully
joined,
that's still around.
when I joined Vice, it was long after you, 2010, I think. But I still had to explain to people what it was.
Right.
When they said,
Yeah.
I was in DC and I was like, I'm going to New York to work for Vice, and then you would have to have the 5-minute conversation about what it was.
Right.
Because it still hadn't really penetrated the culture.
It's a record label specializing in British rap with a
the
tie-in
streets.
a tie-in free magazine. Yeah.
All right, before we go, what is the piece? I was thinking about this the other day, and when I was looking through I have hard drives of all the stuff I've ever shot, like
you?
all the footage, like everything, not the edited
You
stuff,
kept it,
everything.
yeah.
What's the piece you look back on most fondly? Is there anything in particular?
Like, I mean, shit, I don't know. I was trying to like count for some reason however many pieces I did, and I think I got past 40, 50, but it might be north of that.
Yeah.
Like,
What a strange 20s you had.
yeah, it was really cool.
I mean, you'd ask somebody to go to
There's-
Chechnya and they'd make it happen in a couple
There's
of days.
too many options I can give you on.
Yeah.
We shot, when I was making the show Balls Deep, we shot the last week of high school in Gary, Indiana, with this teenager named Keith, and then he had a childhood buddy named Tristan, and they'd both been like best friends until 6th or 7th grade. And then they'd gone on to separate tracks. There was like, you know, kind of like the trade school and then the art school for the kids who tested high and shit like that. And it was, I think I was 30 when I was making that. And it was like, you know, just hanging around with teenagers in like, you know, the epicenter of Rust Belt devastation in America, and also birthplace of Michael Jackson. That piece felt amazing to, like, it felt like capturing lightning, right? I look back on that one with a tremendous fondness, but I liked them all. Like, it's it's crazy. I got to do everything I fucking wanted.
Yeah. That's,
What now?
Yeah.
Kind of rough,
It's all
right?
downhill
Yeah.
from here, Thomas. Thomas Morton, if you want to see his documentary, at the moment it's rather difficult, but I can recommend
Email me.
that you get Thomas's email or get a VPN. And if you get a VPN, you connect to Canada. They have like the bootleg servers in Canada, and you can actually watch it on YouTube if you have a Canadian IP address. So watch the film that Thomas did about Gavin McInnes, and we'll look forward to what you do next, Thomas
Thank you.
Morton.
If
Thank you so much.
and when.
All right, you weren't supposed to see that because I was, for some reason, I was like 300 pounds in that thing and had a full beard, and that was a bit of a pilot, but that was my conversation with Thomas Morton, and guess what? Thomas Morton is here. Hi, Thomas.
Hello, am I on the air?
You are on the air, caller.
Did we wear the same shirt?
Yes, we're both wearing the same shirt because we're in the
How about
band now.
I guess so.
Did you watch that whole interview? Is there anything you regret
Yeah, I just
from
did.
it? Do you want to correct anything that you said? I have
Anytime I'm on camera, I regret it. You know, I regret not having gotten a haircut in the 3 months interceding.
Yeah,
But,
I am really shocked that I'm allowing that to go out, Jason. For some reason, I'm going to allow. I'm literally like really fat in it. It's horrible. Oh,
You and me
my
both.
God.
Winter weight. Yeah.
Yeah, it was winter weight and insulin pump weight. All right, do we have some people that we're gonna bring in here, right, Jason? Do we have who do we have up first that wants to ask Thomas the question? I suppose, and I can. Is it Andrew? We're gonna get Andrew on here. Yeah.
Hi, Andrew.
Hey, can you all hear me?
Okay,
Hey.
there's Andrew. Andrew, how's it going? You got a
All right,
question
sure.
or a comment for Thomas?
Yeah, actually, we brought back some memories. I first remembered seeing Gavin McInnes when he first appeared on Red Eye back in October 2011. And I think Greg found out about him because he was going to Occupy Wall Street protests at Zuccotti Park. And something I posted on the chat where he was holding up a sign saying "fuck the CEOs," but he had a T-shirt that said "commies aren't cool."
Oh
And
yeah.
I know that shirt.
Yeah, and you got the impression you got is a guy who's actually relatively reasonable. Yeah, he was kind of crazy, relatively reasonable. He appeared on Red Eye, as you know, a lot. He also appeared on The Independents quite a bit too. But yeah, it's interesting. He said he doesn't think he's changed. Well, I did think I saw a change over the time.
Yeah.
Probably you
I
all
think-
did too.
I think you did.
Well, and
I
who
know-
doesn't change? You know,
Yeah,
what
exactly.
virtue is it to say that the entire world changed, but not I? You know, like pull a reverse Heraclitus on that. You know.
I will say this, that I was going on Red Eye quite frequently then.
You're an ombudsman.
And, yeah, I just enjoyed doing that show. I'd always meet like interesting, funny comedians and made a bunch of friends from it. But I was put on with Gavin and then put on with Gavin again. And then somebody found out at Vice that I was going to go on the show again with Gavin. And I've never told this story, by the way. They interceded and said, you can't go on. And Gavin, I think, called me or sent me a bunch of like threatening text messages. Not threatening, but just like, you're a coward and blah, blah, blah. And I needed to keep my job. But that was the thing, that he was written out of the story of Vice so much that me appearing on it was considered wrong. And then, of course, he was written out of Fox. I mean, the great story of Gavin is how frequently he gets fired. He was fired from two of his own companies, an advertising agency, Vice. He was fired from, pushed out of Fox. And I believe he had a show for a bit on Glenn Beck's network. Is that right? On The Blaze?
The Blaze?
Yeah, and I think that lasted a week before they got rid of him. But so no, he's very good at
He was on Compound Media, Anthony Kuhn is.
yeah, and then I think he's probably still doing that too. But
That's
he's probably the most canceled person out there, but never, he's one of those cancellations where you're like, oh yeah, I get that. It makes sense.
Yeah. Well, at one
Mr.
point,
Levin.
now I don't know the whole story, but I saw he was it looked like he's thinking he would get on Greg Gutfeld's, a regular one, Greg Gutfeld's weekly show that started in 2015. And he started hurling insults on who he thought who beat him was Tyrus, and went on kind of a tirade against Tyrus for getting on there. But I think this is in 2015, and you can already see the trajectory where Gavin was going at the time. And so,
Yeah. Thomas, have you, when you were doing this documentary, did Did you watch his? What is it? Censored.tv. Is that the name of his thing?
Censor.tv
It's-
changed from freespeech.tv. Yeah,
Uh,
that's his site.
Yes,
It's
like,
mostly paywalled, but it's his own platform. Yeah.
And what are his politics now? Is he still like as enthusiastic about Trump as he was, you know, I don't know, in 2016, 17, 18?
I mean, I was watching everything he put up until the point when we finished filming, and I haven't caught up since. He had a moment when Ann Coulter kind of turned against Trump in, I think it's 2021, after January 6th, after the administration started asking questions like why were his kids, you know, involved in White House affairs or son-in-law.
Yeah.
What was the appeal of this guy? Why did we think he was like a conservative hero or whatever? Gavin started saying similar sorts of things, but that diminished as, you know, the election grew nearer. I couldn't tell you if he was pro-Trump, but he was, you know, certainly anti-Biden and then anti-Kamala Harris.
Well, it's,
but I don't know what he's been up to recently.
Yeah.
I
thing
watched
is
it.
just like these people are so kind of hopelessly uncool, which is the thing that always mystified me. I'll give you an example. Somebody just sent me this. This is a tweet from Ann Coulter today, which is a funny tweet. She said, "Would it be possible to have a cabinet meeting without the Kim Jong-un style tributes?" And there was something today of AG Pam Bondi, and she's like, you know, Mr. President, there's nothing that you do that's wrong. Everything's amazing. And then she goes, and they all preface with this stuff, and it's like it doesn't seem like something that it would be something that he would make fun of in the past, you know.
It's like these people don't think history is going to be written, or that maybe they won't be alive for, you know, to see what their reputation does after this. At some point, this administration will end, and it's a weird balance to make with some of the, you know, more, like, to lightly put it, objectionable, the horrible things that are happening. Just to say that the one recurrent facet of the last 4 months now is just how kind of vicariously embarrassing everything is.
Everything is really embarrassing. No, I mean, that's right. Trying to watch these things, the two things that I always point out are these Juche style encomiums to the president right in front of him, and that's the kind of Juche vibe of it. And the other one is that the Republicans who have realized
that's the North Korean version of way of saying touche.
Yeah, touche. Yeah, it's the accent. But the other thing is that they know that the party has been completely occupied by one person, and because of that, everyone is doing impressions. And I want to do like a reel, if any listeners out there want to help me out and send me stuff, of just the people trying to do Donald Trump impressions, like the insults and, you know, the same language, the fake news stuff. I saw Pete Hegseth doing this on the lawn of the White House in the Easter egg roll, where he's like berating the media by name, and he's like, "You CNN,
in front of his
fake
kids."
news." Yeah, like, and his poor kids are like staring at him like, "God, this is one of them is going to be like trans or something." So, but that was the moment it happened. But to see that is like the cult aspect of it, and the fact that there are a few people running away already. But I just wondered about that about Gavin, just because he does have better taste than all of these people. That must make it hard, because hanging around with people when you have your like Sham 69 shirt on or something, and all these people who have no idea that your cultural references just don't make any sense to them.
Right. Yeah. No. And I mean, that was when we were talking months ago, and I accidentally said the word arch instead of arc.
To
look at who he ended up, you know, I remember an old coworker who was closer friends than I was with Gavin McInnes being upset by something he had said on Twitter in 2016 about something, you know, something vaguely anti-Semitic or a joke that wasn't good. And, who wrote to me and was like, should I respond to this? Like, you know, this got my dander up. Should I yell at him? And I'm like, think about how Gavin McInnes in 2004, when we all knew him, would think about the people he is hanging out with in this day and age, it being 2017, the people he surrounds himself with and who he's not friends with anymore. I was like, can you think of a deeper punishment for the old Gavin than who the new Gavin is and who his social circle is?
Yeah,
you know?
I don't know if I mentioned it. Maybe I did during that interview. I was just listening to it. I can't remember if I mentioned it, but he made a video once about all of his ex friends.
Right.
Like it's like
he
an,
brings it
in
up
like,
a lot.
Yeah, it's like a Norman Podhoretz way, but like my ex friends. But it was all of these famous people and like comedians and people that were David Cross, who he was very close friends with, and all these people that have disappeared. And it was not so much when I saw that of like the friends that have disappeared. It's just what replaced them, and what replaces them are if you see the Proud Boys guys, it's just like, this is just embarrassing. I don't know, but that's just me. But
well, it's like even he had us go. We asked, is there anybody you want us to interview, sort of into your defense? Is there anybody who'll speak to your side from the last 5 or 6 years? And what he told us was, he's like, yeah, I want you to talk to Ann Coulter, Roger Stone, and my dad. It's like, okay, so your dad will speak to your defense. Great rogues gallery right there. And Ann Coulter said no, even though he asked for us. But we went down to Roger Stone, and even Roger Stone, in the course of being a lying weirdo to our faces, even I'm trying to remember the exact phrase he used for the Proud Boys. He was like, it seems like a collective of guys who can't get a date on Saturday night, which is an old kind of like 60s, 70s idiomatic kind of way of
Roger's a swinger too.
It's like it makes me famously.
Yeah, famously a swinger. So,
but it makes me feel bad for these kids in the organization that I'm like, I don't think the people you look up to as your spiritual and political gurus, like I don't think they even like you a lot of the time.
I think that's probably
like
true. Yeah, I think that's probably
and true. I don't and it's a weird thing to weird group to have to sympathize with in a respect, but it's like when you hear what people say, and that was on camera, but when you hear what people say from that circle in the kind of more educated elite sort of spheres, off camera, behind closed doors, it's like I feel like everybody, like nobody likes who they're around.
Yeah.
And this whole thing is just one big con job, or just a kind of mass of con jobs all interwoven with one another.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it seems like in the first 100 days of this administration. There's like all of the scam artists that are particularly good at it. And you don't have to be great at it, but particularly good at it can become, press secretary or, the who's who of the MAGA world. None of whom are.
What do they call it when a bunch of rats get their tails stuck together and they start functioning as a single organism? Is that a king rat? Rat king. Sorry,
Rat
I got
king?
backwards.
Sound guy says Rat King. I'm glad that I didn't know. I didn't know that Rat King. Yeah, there's a Rat King thing going on, and now I'm going to use that and pretend it was mine. Thomas, I want to congratulate you on the nomination for what is it, the Canadian Academy Awards or whatever?
Le Prix Écran. Yeah, Canadian Screen Awards, Le Prix Écran.
Oh, look at that! And so you're nominated for Best Documentary. Is that right?
We are.
Are you going to go to the ceremony?
I don't think the documentary category is part of the ceremony.
Oh.
Like as you must know from like Emmys and stuff like that, there's only the fancy stuff with big star,
exactly
star people actually get to go to the red carpet and da 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 da.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if they have a red carpet there, if it's something else like red and white. But
well, I imagine you'll probably lose to a documentary
We'll
about
see.
the Tragically Hip or something anyway, or
the other 4 documentaries, I think 3 of them are about Gaza. So it's like, you take serious subject matter and then you take my romp with my former boss.
Yeah, the Gaza, that's just,
unlikely.
It used to be the old Holocaust. The Holocaust maybe would insure you a prize. I think it's the Gaza documentary now.
Yeah.
All right, Thomas, thank you. And thanks for rejoining us again to look at what we looked like 3 or 4 months ago. That haggard
Thanks. Yeah,
appearance.
we both lost a little weight, didn't we?
Both lost a little weight and cleaned
good.
up, despite the fact that I don't look cleaned up at all. All right, Thomas, go watch his documentary. I said that before, but I'll say it again. It's on the CBC's website, and just fire up that VPN, and you can watch it on YouTube. All right, thanks for joining us, and be sure to tune in on Thursday. We're going to air the footage from our live event at the Village Underground, where we had a lively debate about the Trump administration's record of free speech, but it's happening right now. So I'm presuming that It's a pretty rip-roaring debate, but it's happening right now. And if you missed it because you were too lazy and stupid to actually get a ticket and you don't live in New York City, I get it. Excuses, excuses. Thursday, we'll be airing it right here on the Moynihan Report. So we'll see you then.